reciprocity. And it's time for a president to take historic change to do what's right for the American people.
The last thing we need to do, in my opinion, is hurt our families or hurt our small businesses with a new tax.
We've gotten thousands of small contributions from Americans all across the country who are really concerned about Elon Musk.
I am not running to fulfill anybody's wildest dreams or go through anybody's wish list. I want to follow the law.
Hello, everyone. I'm Major Garrett in Washington. Tonight on America Decides, tariffs and your economic future. The Trump administration will unveil its long-planned reciprocal tariffs this week. As of now, the White House says no exceptions. A 25% import tax on foreign-made cars and auto parts is also set to go into effect. That could push the average price of vehicles sold here up as much as $10,000. Your voice. The president was voted back into power mainly on economic issues, but a new CBS News poll shows a majority of Americans are not yet sold on his economic policies. Why they're more concerned about the price of a carton of eggs, as an example, than taxing our trading partners. What? A Trump third term? The president tells CBS News he is, quote, not joking. That's a quote about a third presidential term. And even while the 22nd Amendment of the Constitution bars explicitly such a thing, Trump says, quote, there are methods, unquote, to do so.
I have had more people say, please run again. I said, we have a long way to go before we even think about that.
As to that CBS News poll, Anthony Salvanto has the latest numbers. Kelly O'Grady is going to track the impact of the president's tariffs. But first, I want to start with Finn Gomez, who's right here at the table. Finn, this third term thing keeps circulating.
Sure.
Reporters keep telling themselves it's a joke. The president keeps talking about it. I don't think it's a joke.
He says it's not a joke, and he said it.
And I believe we should take the president by his word.
And look, I spoke to some Democrats and some Republicans today who say that they are taking this seriously. At the same time, I've spoken to many who say this could just be a political cherry bomb that he uses to distract and change the headlines. So there could be some of that. And like you said, yes, there are methods of changing this, but what are those methods?
There are no methods.
Well, there are some methods.
Okay.
I mean, but look, we're looking at the 22nd, but you know, what impedes those methods are the 22nd and the 12th
the Constitution,
in the Constitution, right? But he would need 2/3 to change the Constitution, 2/3 of vote.
Okay, through a constitutional amendment.
Constitutional amendment, which is,
that's
as
a
you know,
method.
As a method. Look, up until FDR and post-FDR, this was about tradition. It was tradition and not indoctrinating to the Constitution. That happened in the 22nd Amendment. It took years to do that. Sure. So, I mean, yes, but no. I mean, there really isn't.
And the Senate Majority Leader John Thune said today that's what's going to have to happen. You amend the Constitution, then we can talk about it.
Sure, yes. And at the same time, there are those who have serious reservations that I spoke to about some of this language that we're hearing from the president. But again, even some Republicans on the Hill today were saying he's probably messing with you guys when he was talking to the press.
You're just being trolled and falling for it like you always do, silly reporters. Yeah, well, let's keep an eye on this space. Finn, this is an enormously important week for the trajectory of the president's economic agenda, not in terms of tax cuts or regulatory overhauls or things that Congress is going to be working on, but about his desire, his clear desire to increase tariffs and use that as an economic tool globally.
Yeah, absolutely. And something that he's, frankly, as we know, he's been talking about this for years, decades. This is something he truly believes. He also utilizes, as I'm sure Kelly's going to get into later, he utilizes the threat of tariffs to get folks to the negotiating table, right? This is a tried and true method that he has done. Looking back at NAFTA, turning it to USMCA back in his first term, he does this. There's a lot of unclarity still what we're going to expect come Wednesday, but we do know is Trump loves a good tariff, and he also loves it as a negotiating tool.
And the White House, as I understand, said today that because there is that expectation of some negotiating space, the specifics may not be known until the last minute, as other nations phone a friend, they hope, and say, well, what if we do this? Would you do that? Back and forth.
Yeah, yes, and you've seen some of that volatility, not only in how our allies have reacted to this, but also like in the markets and whatever else. But it could come down to the last minute. We've seen that before. It's something right out of Trump's playbook. Just to wait till the last second, to kind of rattle a few people to sort of get that leverage and place them in a place where they want them to be as they start negotiating.
Vin Gomez, great to have you here. Kelly O'Grady joins me now to discuss all this. Kelly, I want to play some sound from the president last night on Air Force One, and I wonder if you have any opinion as to whether or not it, in a salutary way, affected the psychology of the markets today. Let's listen.
The tariffs will be far more generous than those countries were to us, meaning they will be kinder than those countries were to the United States of America over the decades. They ripped us off like no country's ever been ripped off in history. And we're going to be much nicer than they were to us, but it's substantial money for the country.
So, Kelly, the market's up today. Generous, kinder, nicer. That's the word cloud from that soundbite.
Yeah, it was probably a word cloud that investors wanted to hear. I mean, look, the president talks and the markets move. You saw how they opened today. They were actually significantly down. I was talking to a number of analysts. We were expecting another Friday. Remember that very big rout, that big sell-off. But particularly the Dow closed up. You're seeing it right now, 418 points. And it was driven by the Magnificent Seven, particularly Tesla, Meta, and NVIDIA. Those three still closed down, but they regained a lot of their losses to almost sort of finish even. And so I highlight those stocks because tech has really been a safe haven for investors. And I think a lot of folks, after that language from the president, saw this as a buying opportunity. Get NVIDIA when it's closer to 100 before it ultimately, even months down the road, increases as we see the AI race develop.
And Kelly, just for the benefit of the audience, Mag 7 or the Magnificent Seven is not a Marvel movie. What is it?
Yes, fair point. Thank you for that clarification. It is your major tech stocks. So Apple, NVIDIA, Tesla, Microsoft, Alphabet, which is Google, sort of the 7 big tech stocks.
So as this week plays out, what do you think? And it's impossible to know, so I'm not trying to pin you down on that, but how do you think it would be worth watching the markets play out this week as the tariffs go into effect in specificity?
So we saw that big sell-off on Friday. I think you saw a lot of what we like to call smart money. Those are the hedge funds get out in anticipation of what is going to happen on Wednesday. And in fact, Major, we're at the end of Q1 here. I went back and I looked at how the markets performed as a whole. The biggest drops in the stock market never came on the days where we had those big announcements around aluminum tariffs or tariffs on China. They came on days where we got economic data we weren't expecting or soft data, when consumer sentiment dropped or inflation on Friday came in higher than expected. So really, with the markets, I'm looking towards Friday when we get our next picture of the jobs report and the unemployment picture. Versus Wednesday, where I think we're sort of all expecting uncertainty. So you might see less movement in the markets there.
Always a pleasure. So much knowledge. Kelly O'Grady, thank you. CBS News Executive Director of Elections and Surveys, your friend and mine, Anthony Salvanto, joins me now. Anthony, more data has come in. You are analyzing it. What's the most important thing you see?
How you doing, Major? Look, straight off the bat for the day's news, new tariffs on imported cars. You get majority opposition to that, right? So for context here, and it's not overwhelming, but it's about how people feel that tariffs might affect the price they pay going forward. And I want to show you this because we tested what people think will happen in the short term and the long term. Of course, the administration's argument, right, is that this will have beneficial effects going forward longer term. Well, look, you get big numbers who think the tariffs in general will raise prices in the short term, but you still get the bulk of people thinking that over the long term, that'll increase prices too. Why is that important? Because they've said prices are their top concern, said prices are the main reason that they don't feel good about the economy right now. So that puts a lot of what they think will be added pressure on something they already feel is a problem.
Anthony, branding matters in politics. It certainly matters to President Trump. It always has, even before he was in the political sphere. Who owns this economy in perception right now, and how much does this tariff push from the president move branding more in his direction?
See, I think that's a great question because it's not always a matter of time. Sometimes it's a matter of action. So I'll answer the first part of that. Who owns this economy? Mostly, for a lot of people, it's Joe Biden still, right? Maybe not a surprise because we still are early in the administration. So I asked who's responsible for inflation, and that's what you get. But Donald Trump's policies now are starting to compete with that, or at least share it. And what I mean by action and not necessarily time, Major, is that it could be that over a duration, a year or two, people start to associate a president with an economy. But it's when a president takes actions, and obviously a lot of people are focused on this one, that might start to make people connect what happens with a given economy. And back to the stock market real quick, I'll show you this example. Before today, a lot of folks thought that Trump's policies were making the stock market go down. So they start to see a little bit of that connection in the public mind.
Anthony, when the president muses out loud, as he frequently does, about what led him to be reelected, he often talks about immigration. What does our data tell us about that issue and voter evaluation of it?
It's one of the areas in which he is doing well or better than he's doing on the economy. So while he's a little bit negative on handling economy and inflation, he's positive on immigration. That's something I should add that for his voters in particular, they say right now they're evaluating him on delivering on immigration just as much as they are in the economy. And then this in particular, his program to deport immigrants they believe are illegally in the U.S., that gets majority approval too. And that, for some, is kind of outweighing, if they don't quite have the economy they wanted yet, for his base, they're getting this.
Anthony Salvanto with the data and the story it tells. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
It has become the most expensive judicial race in American history, and you may not even know the names of the candidates, but billionaire backers, Elon Musk, George Soros, they're making their money heard. Our Ed O'Keefe is live in Wisconsin ahead of tomorrow's Supreme Court election. That's next, right here on America Decides. Welcome back to America Decides. Tomorrow, a special election will determine the Wisconsin Supreme Court's ideological makeup. Now, strictly, this is a nonpartisan election. But behind that gloss, both parties have drawn a line. And their voters will have a choice between the Democratic-backed candidate, Susan Crawford, and the Republican-backed candidate, Brad Schemmel. The contest has already become the most expensive, as we mentioned, going to break, judicial race in the history of our country. And it includes massive donations from George Soros on the left, Elon Musk on the right, but lots of other grassroots donors have involved themselves as well. Now, Musk did something in this race he did in the general election last year, handing out $1 million payments via lottery to voters or potential voters. The state Supreme Court refused to hear a petition from Wisconsin's Democratic Attorney General to stop those checks from being handed out. Our Ed O'Keefe joins us now, I'm happy to say, from Wisconsin. Ed, great to see you. I'm glad you're there. You spoke to the candidates. What do they tell you?
Well, we focused a lot of the conversation, Major, on the fact that so much money from out of state is being spent on this race. As you mentioned, Elon Musk doing a combined roughly $15 million now between personal donations and money that his PAC has donated, including those $1 million checks he gave out last night. Ironic that the state Supreme Court, where a seat is up for grabs, declined to rule on the legality of him doing that and allowed him to move forward with it. Then you got several million from guys like George Soros, Reid Hoffman, six-figure sums from people like Reid Hoffman. J.B. Pritzker, the Democratic governor of Illinois, has given $1.5 million to the state party that got transferred into this race as well. So lots of big money from out of state. We talked to Susan Crawford, then Brad Schemmel, about money in this judicial race. Take a listen. Part of the reason, really the only reason we're here, is because while this is a statewide race, it has drawn tens of millions of dollars from across the country, primarily from a handful of wealthy people on both sides.
No, that's actually not true.
Well, you have Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker, who donated a bunch of money to the state party that got funneled to your campaign. You got George Soros, who donated a lot of money to the state party that got funneled to your campaign.
Let me just point out one fact, okay? The amount of money that Elon Musk has spent in the last 8 weeks exceeds what my campaign has raised in the last 10 months over the entire course of the campaign. It is not comparable whatsoever.
But there's money from both sides coming in from the outside.
Certainly, but my average campaign contribution is $107. So we've received tens of thousands of contributions from ordinary people. Twice as many Wisconsinites have contributed to my campaign as have contributed to Brad Schimmel's campaign. And we've gotten thousands of small contributions from Americans all across the country who are really concerned about Elon Musk, as the richest man in the world, being able to come in and buy a state judicial seat.
The accusation that he's spending tens of millions of dollars to buy a seat and that you're the guy that's going to help him do that, you say?
You'd have to ask him why he spent all this money.
We'd love to.
Yeah, I didn't ask for it. I didn't know that was going to happen. Like I think I said, it's hard to get your message out to all the voters in Wisconsin. Even though I've campaigned in all 72 counties and I've been doing it for a long time, it is hard to get your message to everybody. So when that help comes in, I'm grateful for it. As long as that help isn't pretending I'm going to do anything that I wouldn't do.
So, this is a race to determine the ideological balance of a major high state court in a battleground state where issues like abortion rights, labor union rights, congressional redistricting, and election law are all going to come before it in the coming years. But the kind of thing that might make you go, is the fact that two judges who should perhaps be focused mostly on that issue have been consumed by questions from voters and from reporters about the amount of money being spent to put one of them on this court, Major. And it's just a really vivid example of how this has become a proxy fight between supporters and detractors of President Trump, most especially because Elon Musk got involved the way he did.
And to that point, Ed, is there any danger in overreading the outcome of tomorrow's election and its implications nationally for Trump, Musk, Republicans, or Democrats?
If the Democrats can hold on to this and maintain the 4-3 ideological balance, status quo is maintained, but it might be a shot in the arm to Democrats to go, okay, we figured out a way to hold on to a key thing in a big battleground state. If the Republican, Brad Schimmel, takes it with Musk's money, then his PAC and he himself are going to be getting calls from across the country from Republican candidates of all sorts saying, please come play in my backyard too, because you may be the key to victory. But otherwise, this is a race for a seat on the high court in a Midwestern state that's going to deal with issues of concern to this state. But given it's a presidential battleground, given issues like abortion rights, voting rights, labor rights are galvanizing in battleground states like this one, it's gotten all this attention and could very well throw the race either way.
That is why we're happy to have Ed O'Keefe in Wisconsin. All the beat knowledge you could possibly want. Ed, thanks so very much. Elon Musk may be helping fuel a voter surge in that very state where Ed O'Keefe just was and will be tomorrow. Wisconsin, more than 500,000 people have already cast ballots in the state's Supreme Court election. We'll take a closer look at what those numbers might suggest next, right here on America Decides. Welcome back. Thank you for staying with us. All this national attention on the Wisconsin Supreme Court race is having an effect on turnout. More than 644,000 ballots have already been cast. CBS News Deputy Director of Elections and Data Analytics, and I want to stress, your friend and mine also, Kabir Khanna, joins me here at the desk. Kabir, it's always great to see you. Turnout, talk to me about it.
It's nice to see you, too, and it's fun to be talking to you about a judicial off-year race in Wisconsin. That's not the type of thing we typically spend a lot of time on at the data desk. And that's because, historically speaking, these races have kind of been snooze fests, at least from a perspective of voter engagement and participation. I pulled some historical turnout figures, and as recently as 2017, turnout was in the teens as a percentage of citizens statewide. Well, what's happened over the years is that these campaigns have become increasingly nationalized, focused on national issues and political figures. They've become more divisive and more partisan, and as you've said, they've become incredibly expensive. We've seen an uptick in the turnout rate over the years, culminating in 2 years ago, where turnout was a record 40% statewide and resulted in 1.8 million votes. That was a year in which the Liberal candidate won in a landslide. I want to take a closer look at those turnout figures because it's an interesting comparison race to what's happening now. 2 years ago, about 450,000 ballots were cast ahead of Election Day. Well, this year, it's over 640,000. That's 40% growth since 2 years ago. We don't know exactly what that means for total turnout, but it's probably going to be pretty high.
So geography is sometimes, though not always, a helpful clue as to where things might be trending. Anything geographically significant or near significant in these early turnout numbers?
There is. And the thing is, in a year after a presidential election, there's always going to be a turnout and drop-off. Some people who voted in the presidential won't vote this year, even if turnout's high in relative terms. The question is, where is the drop-off larger, and in what types of communities is the turnout drop-off smaller? What we're seeing in the early votes so far is that in some deep blue counties, like Milwaukee County, and in Dane County, home to Madison, a deep blue city, the turnout is tracking pretty similarly to where it was 2 years ago in that liberal landslide win. It's about a third of all ballots cast so far. Meanwhile, in the Milwaukee suburbs, which lean Republican, they're a hair above where they were 2 years ago. But remember, because that was a liberal win, if turnout is similar geographically, the Crawford campaign is probably looking at these numbers and feeling pretty good.
Susan Crawford is the Democratic-backed candidate.
That's right,
race.
the liberal justice.
And very quickly, what should we look at as we're sifting things tomorrow night?
Yeah, so this leads directly to what I'm going to be looking at, which is, can the Election Day turnout surge in the deep red rural counties in Wisconsin, home to lots of white working-class voters, overcome the deficit conservatives are likely in with the early vote right now?
You'll be watching it, we'll be watching it, and we'll have more coverage on Wednesday.
Yes, thank you, Major.
Thank you so very much. Indiana Congresswoman Victoria Spartz faces something approximating backlash at a town hall. Her remarks about Elon Musk and Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth and why some who were in attendance weren't all that happy about it. You're watching America Decides. Welcome back to America Decides. Congresswoman Victoria Spartz is the latest Republican lawmaker to come face-to-face with some constituents none too pleased about what's going on in Washington. She experienced this at a town hall she hosted over the weekend. Here's one of the statements she made that incited, well, kind of a less than rapturous response from the crowd.
What President Trump did it last time when he tried. If you seek asylum, wait in the other country. There is no due process if you come here illegally because you violated the law. Period.
Talking about immigration, a lot of cacophony back and forth. That's sort of indicative of where things were. I want to bring in our political panel, Shelby Talcott, White House correspondent for Semaphore, and Reese Gorman, politics reporter at Notice. Remember, Notice News of the U.S. Shelby, we'll get to that sort of stuff there in a minute, but I want to talk to you about your reporting under the heading of Fight Club mentality within the Trump White House. What does that mean, and what does that suggest about what will or will not happen in the aftermath of the controversy last week about the Signal group chat and attack plans in Yemen?
Well, the Trump 1.0 administration, we saw a lot of firings. People, it was sort of a revolving door.
I was there every day. They came fast and furious.
Exactly. They came, they went. This time around, it's very different. The president has not really fired anybody, and part of the reason is internally they have a no scalps policy, which is the idea that the Trump administration believes that the more Democrats and Trump opponents want somebody to get fired over anything, whether it is Signalgate or elsewhere, the more resistant the administration is to do that. And they have taken a lesson from the Trump 1.0 administration, and they feel actually that they made mistakes in the first Trump administration, that they let people go too easily, and it sort of emboldened their opponents. And so what we're seeing here is that resistance. And the more we hear calls for Mike Waltz to resign, the more unlikely it is at this moment.
And there's a lot of reporting that speculates about is Mike Waltz up or down. You get various reads on that. Caroline Leavitt, the press secretary, talked about that today. Let's listen.
Mike Waltz continues to be an important part of his national security team, and this case has been closed here at the White House as far as we are concerned. There have been steps made to ensure that something like that can obviously never happen again, and we're moving forward.
What does that tell you?
I think that's very interesting that she said specifically that she said the case has been closed, because we really haven't heard exactly what happened. We've heard a lot of rumors. Clearly, Mike Waltz, according to those screenshots, added the reporter to the group chat inadvertently. But I think it shows that the White House wants to get past this. They are done talking about it. They are considering the point moot, no matter how much the constituents or Democrats or, quite frankly, some Republicans call for more investigations into it.
Reese, you also have reporting on this important week ahead for Senate Republicans, House Republicans. And ladies and gentlemen, I promise you, on this program in the not-too-distant future, we're going to do kind of a drill down on what reconciliation is, why that process matters. But that's not what we're going to do right here. What we're just going to talk about is where the Senate and House Republicans are on a budget resolution, this broader framework. Walk us through that.
Yeah, so if you remember, the Senate passed the first of their two-bill strategy earlier in the year. The House then said they couldn't do two bills, so they passed their one-bill budget. And now they have to come to a compromise. So the Senate is working on their one-bill compromise. Sources tell us, as I reported today, that this could happen, be adopted as early as Wednesday. It could also run into Friday, Saturday with some vote-a-ramas, which is where they just vote on a bunch of amendments throughout the night and can go till 3, 4 in the morning.
It's not nearly as fun as it sounds.
Not in the slightest, actually. And so basically, they're just trying to come to a compromise budget on this one-bill strategy that they can then send back to the House. Now, they are pretty far apart. There are a lot of cuts that some of the senators are not comfortable with. Senators also want to make the Trump tax cuts permanent, which is going to cost a lot more money. House does not believe they can do that because there's some House members that say that the bill has to pay for itself, which would mean cutting Medicaid, cutting some entitlements, which is also something that Trump himself has said that he doesn't want. So there's quite a ways away right now on this, and they're still like on the easiest part, which is the budget. There's not even any policy attached to this yet.
And Reese, let's talk about something that's also part of these dialogues that the audience will grasp onto because it carries with it the specter of a default. Debt ceiling.
Yes.
Is it going to be in there or not? And if it isn't, how is that going to be resolved? Because that overhangs a lot of what may or may become of the Trump agenda and economic volatility in the markets.
So the debt ceiling, I mean, right now the House, my reporting has showed, which I think I reported last month, was that Mike Johnson does want this in there. He does want debt ceiling in there because he believes that if he could sweeten it up with just all the say, oh, you're going to vote against reconciliation because of debt ceiling, well, you're also going to be voting against budget, and then how can Republicans go back and run on that? So he's trying to just get it out of the way. He thinks this will be easy. But if you remember, there's a handful of members who have never voted for a debt ceiling increase.
House and Senate.
And Republican members, that is. And so a lot of times, I mean, if you remember 2 years ago, Kevin McCarthy, he needed Democrats. More Democrats voted for it than Republicans did. And that was a pretty conservative debt ceiling hike that had some cuts into it. And so this one, if you're just going to throw a clean debt ceiling hike into it and expect no Democrat help, which is reconciliation is purely partisan, that's going to be very difficult to get through. And so that's also kind of the talk right now.
Shelby, all the things we're talking about are what former President Clinton, who I also covered, would describe as a world-class problem. They're a problem of governing. And how do you govern? Well, when you're in the majority. The Democrats not in the majority, not governing, and a governor, a California governor, possible candidate in 2028, Gavin Newsom, said this very recently about the Democratic brand.
These guys are crushing us. The Democratic brand is toxic right now. I think with this podcast and having the opportunity to dialogue with people I disagree with, it's an opportunity to try to find common ground and not take cheap shots.
Toxic.
Yeah, I mean, he was very blunt there. And I think that is sort of the core problem that the Democratic Party has is they can't agree what the problem is almost, right? We've heard from Senator John Fetterman, who has said similar things, that basically the party needs to change fundamentally. We've heard from Congressman Ro Khanna, who criticized those remarks and said, no, this is not the way to do things. And so there's no core leader in the Democratic Party right now, and there's no core messaging. And you're seeing sort of the fallout from that. You're seeing all of these different Democrats suggest different things and sort of argue over what the fundamental issue of the Democratic Party is and how to move forward with that.
And Reese, when you're on Capitol Hill, what do you hear?
Yeah, I think that a lot of Democrats see this as kind of Gavin Newsom trying to reinvent himself ahead of 2028. I mean, the Democrats, there's...
Quite obviously.
100%. They view this as somewhat,
because he's the one who was first out there with billboards in Texas and Florida.
100%.
Giving the stiff arm to Trumpists, Republicans, MAGA, the whole thing. Yeah. And now he's like, no, come to my podcast.
100%. And so they view this as kind of disingenuous, some of them, because, I mean, a lot of them do kind of feel that the Democratic Party does have a lot of problems. You're seeing right now with Jeffries and refusing
Hakeem
originally
Jeffries, House Minority Leader, yeah.
to endorse Schumer. Chuck Schumer, Senate Minority Leader, a while back. And then, like, there's a lot of infighting right now. There are disagreements about where the Democratic Party stands. But a lot of people kind of rolling their eyes when what they're seeing Gavin Newsom doing, especially with Charlie Kirk on his podcast and all this.
And there's a risk with what he's doing also. If you go too far to criticizing the Democratic Party, then you lose Democratic voters.
It might help in the general, but it doesn't matter if you can't get out of a primary.
Yeah.
So,
Shelby Talcott, East Gorman, always a pleasure. Thanks so much to have you. Overseas, far-right French politician Marine Le Pen is blasting a ruling that bars her from politics in that country for 5 years. The far-right figurehead was charged with misusing more than $4 million in European funds. A Paris court also handed Le Pen, who was the front-runner for the next election, a 4-year prison sentence, 2 of those years under house arrest, and also imposed a fine. Le Pen professed her innocence in a social media post today, and her lawyers say they will file an appeal. Ahead tonight, Republicans signal concerns about Florida's special election as the candidates vie to replace Mike Waltz. Some Republicans fear this heavily Trumpist district, well, isn't as safe as they first thought. Plus, the president fires dozens from the Justice Department, a move that current and former DOJ officials are calling not only unusual, but alarming. All that coming up next, right here on America Decides. Welcome back to America Decides. Thanks for staying with us. The White House has confirmed reports the Department of Justice has fired more than 50 U.S. attorneys and deputy U.S. attorneys. Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt said today, the American people deserve a judicial branch full of honest arbiters of the law who want to protect democracy, not subvert it, end quote. Department of Justice reporter Jake Rosen joins me now. What can you tell us about these firings, and under what evidence can the White House point to that any of those fired were subverting democracy?
Right. These firings mostly are line prosecutors. So they're people really who come in and do the day-to-day arguing. They don't get to choose their cases. They're not political appointees. And they're not part of this traditional turnover that you see between administrations. At the U.S. attorney level, that's a big thing, right, where you're getting appointed. And we've seen all across the administration so far, even so far as Alina Habba, a senior advisor to Donald Trump, being an interim U.S. attorney in New Jersey, right, where that's a political job that she got. These are people who do the day-to-day across administration work. There's an example out of a man out of Los Angeles who ran for Congress in New York as a Democrat and spoke out loudly against Donald Trump in 2020. He lost his primary to Mondaire Jones in that race, but he went back to his day-to-day job outside of that and was assigned to a task force going after securities fraud in California. He got according to news reports, got an email, and our CBS News colleagues confirmed that it was a short email from the White House, not the Department of Justice, not a senior U.S. attorney in Los Angeles or California. It was a direct political move to go after him, and I think the big thing that we have to remember here is the ecosystem that we live in. Conspiracy theorist Laura Loomer, about an hour before that, basically reshuffled some of his past comments about Donald Trump and the danger that he said at the time in his congressional race Donald Trump posed to America. About an hour later, he received that email from the White House. So I think it shows more than anything that these people who, yes, he did take an overtly political stance. So I think that's exactly what the Trump administration is trying to prove, that there are people in the DOJ who have this bias or role, but at the same time, it is someone who went back to their day-to-day job and was actively working on these cases.
And let's separate one from the other. So the political actions were taken in a race where he was an announced candidate and he lost the primary, then he went back to his other job. And within that other job, is there any evidence to suggest he did anything other than stay within the lines?
Not that we've seen so far, and not for any of these other people as well.
And also, just to understand and underscore for the audience's benefit, it is not typical for a White House to directly involve itself in personnel matters of this granularity in the Justice Department.
Rare, unprecedented. I mean, you each pick the word. It's just not something that happens traditionally, specifically because these people, again, are before this administration, were the insulated class of these attorneys who, no matter what the case was, are doing the day-to-day arguing. And the 170-plus hearings that we are tracking here at CBS about the administration's actions, it's basically the same set of day-to-day prosecutors who are working on these cases because they haven't turned over with the new administration. They take the charge and directive that's given to them. Many, like we've seen on these military moves that the Trump administration has made too, right? You don't choose your assignment, you just do the work that is assigned to you the best you can.
And very quickly, Jake, we don't know for a fact that there's a cause and effect. Laura Loomer puts something on social media, an email gets sent, but it certainly looks aligned.
And certainly, and I think that, you and I have talked about this before, that there is this sense of loyalty that needs to be met. And by even breaking line and then returning to it with no evidence to prove that there was any past actions in his investigations or in any of these other people that we've seen fired, there are consequences for that. Yeah.
Things can change. Jake Rosen, thank you very much. I appreciate it. We turn now to the state of Florida, where Republicans are fighting to hold on to a congressional seat that has recently performed pretty well for President Trump and Trump-aligned Republicans. Tomorrow, voters in the state's 6th congressional district will determine who will fill the seat recently held by President Trump's now National Security Advisor Mike Waltz. Republican State Senator Randy Fine has been outraised by his Democratic opponent, Josh Weil. Let's bring in our Torian Small, who is covering this race for CBS News. Torian, it's great to see you. I'm glad you're there. What are you hearing? What's going on there?
Yeah, Major, what's interesting, I'm hearing on both sides that this is a race to watch. Republicans are saying that they expect that this will be a closer than usual race, considering Donald Trump, you said this state has performed, or this congressional district has performed well for Republicans, but that's as recent as 4 months ago when Donald Trump won this district by 30 points. Mike Waltz, before being elevated to the Trump administration, won his race by 33 points. They're expecting a smaller margin. Democrats say the reason why is because of messaging. They've really hammered home the point that Social Security is on the ballot. And I talked about that with both Josh Weil and Randy Fine at their respective canvassing events today. This is what they had to say.
Whether it's cost of groceries, issues with housing, cost of homeowners insurance, there are a lot of factors. And for him to come in and, propose for there to be tax cuts for billionaires that, Social Security could see cuts of up to 28% is not what they asked for.
Democrats are running on Social Security, warning voters in their minds that Donald Trump and Republicans are looking to slash Social Security. This is a district with quite a few retirees. Are you hearing those concerns from constituents or from voters as you talk to them on the trail?
A little bit. To show you what a disgusting person I'm running against, he sent mailers to Republicans where he quoted me saying I would do bad things to Social Security. Quoted me. He said, Randy Fine said, quote. Problem is, I didn't say it. He doesn't even cite it. It's one thing to give your opinion about someone. It's another thing to make up a statement that they never said. And if they'll lie about that, they'll lie about anything.
And those ads from Will are ubiquitous. He raised about $10 million in this race compared to Randy Fine, who raised just under $1 million. I also asked about the disparity and the ability to fundraise in such a crucial race. And Randy Fine brushed it off, saying he's not getting money from outside states like Will, but Will says it's indicative of the fact that this is a different time and there is a chance in his mind the Democrats could actually perform well here.
And Torian, very, very quickly, the Democrats aren't expecting to win this seat. They're just trying to keep a narrow margin.
Yeah, they're trying to close that gap at least. Okay. Again, this is a district that went around 30 points. If they could do within 10, at least be within striking distance, it sends a message that voters here aren't on board with Trump's agenda.
Hoping for single digits, Democrats are. Torian Small, great to have you there. Thanks so much. President Trump has been making cuts to government-funded media outlets. The Voice of America has already been targeted. Could PBS and NPR be next? We'll talk about it here on America Decides. Welcome back. A federal judge on Friday issued a ruling that for the moment halts the Trump administration efforts to dismantle the largest and oldest international broadcaster in the U.S., Voice of America, more commonly known as VOA. President Trump issued an executive order earlier this month slashing funding after accusing the news service of having a, quote, leftist bias, unquote. The president has also repeatedly called for the defunding of NPR and PBS.
They spend more money than any other network of its type ever conceived. So the kind of money that's being wasted, and it's a very biased view. I'd be honored to see it end.
The day after the president said that, the heads of both NPR and PBS defended their programming while testifying on Capitol Hill. David Botter joins me now. He is the Associated Press's national media writer. David, it's always great to see you. Let me do something on your behalf and mine, because there is an elephant in the room of this conversation you and I are both to have. That elephant is my news organization and yours is involved in litigation with this administration. Lawyers are handling that, and neither you nor I will speak to how the lawyers are handling that. Now that that's settled, let's move on.
Thank you.
Talk to my audience about PBS and NPR. What do they get from the federal government in terms of taxpayer funds, and what is their national reach?
They get about $535 million from the Corporation from Public Broadcasting a year. And their national reach is, there's about over 300 stations that PBS has and quite a large number that NPR has as well across the country. So it's got a very large reach.
And David, I know it's impossible to give a definitive answer to this, but could either survive without this taxpayer money?
That's a question they don't really want to answer. I don't think. It probably would be easier for NPR, but I think it would be a lot harder for PBS, particularly with some of their smaller stations across the country.
And David, you and I are familiar with efforts within the Republican Party for many years to try to defund PBS and NPR. This one appears as serious, if not more serious, than any ones that came before it.
I think that's precisely right. I mean, I think what has saved them over the years, because some of the complaints that many of the Republican legislators are making are similar to ones that they've made for many years about a liberal bias, they believe, in some of the news coverage that they have. But what saves them all the time is the fact that most of these legislators have PBS or NPR stations in their districts, and they don't want to see them get hurt. And ultimately, at the end of the day, it winds up getting saved. But the atmosphere is much different right now, as you know. So it's a bit more of a mystery as to what's going to happen.
Voice of America has not been in this barrel before that I recall, David.
I can't either. I mean, it's a very serious barrel that they're in right now. They've taken very strong steps. And the president has a very strong view about what he wants Voice of America to be, and his people are following his orders quite carefully.
Republican member of Congress Young Kim was on 60 Minutes last night and talked about the implications from her point of view of defunding Voice of America. Let's listen.
When we are in an information war, and we stop broadcasting into those repressive governments and into repressive societies, they're not gonna hear the truth. Why are we ceding our soft power that helps us to stay as a free world leader? We're just playing right into Xi Jinping's hands.
David, evaluate that, because that's one of the reasons that VOA has always existed.
I saw that report, and I think what's interesting here is a lot of Americans don't really know what VOA is and what it does because they don't hear it. So it's new to a lot of people. And when the president comes out and says that, it's saying bias in what it says, they don't necessarily know the charter of VOA. They don't necessarily know what it has been doing historically. And a lot of people really think, well, why aren't they telling the story of what's good about America instead of telling a non-biased news perspective of things? So they have a battle in their hands in terms of public relations and trying to get people to understand what's going on and the importance of this.
And yet VOA journalists have been all over the world for decades.
I know. But again, a lot of people don't really understand that and what has been happening because VOA is not heard in the United States.
David Botter, it's always a pleasure. Thank you, sir.
Good to talk to you, Major. Thank you.
You can watch the full 60 Minutes report about Voice of America by visiting 60minutes.com. That does it for today. I'll be back with another edition of America Decides tomorrow at 5 p.m. Eastern. The Daily Report starts right now.